The young and the restless spoilers in the quiet, sterile hallway of the Genoa City Hospital, the air felt thick with an unspoken truth. The kind of truth no one wanted to say out loud, the kind that lingered behind the glass of hospital room doors and flickered in the lowered eyes of nurses. Amy had heard it before the doctor even said a word. She had seen it in the slight tremor in his hands, the gentle clearing of his throat, and the way his gaze kept drifting to the floor as if he were asking for forgiveness from the very tiles beneath his shoes. The diagnosis was conclusive. Her illness, once a silent storm quietly brewing within her, had now reached a point where treatment was little more than hope wrapped in science fiction. The words "there's nothing more we can do" may not have been spoken aloud, but Amy heard them anyway, echoing louder than any voice in the room. The prognosis was grim. Her chances of survival had dwindled into statistical dust. Numbers too cruel to quantify, percentages too hollow to offer comfort. And as the days passed, Amy felt the weight of her body change. Not in form, but in spirit. The exhaustion became bone-deep. Smiles felt like lies. Breaths grew heavier, more precious. The mirror no longer reflected a woman she recognized, but instead a stranger slowly vanishing before her eyes. And with that transformation came a decision. One that no one could truly understand, not even the people who loved her most. Amy, proud and private to the very end, couldn't bear the thought of being remembered as frail, withering, or full of tubes and beeping machines. She didn't want to see the sorrow in Damien's eyes. Didn't want to watch Nate clench his jaw in quiet grief. Didn't want Audra to whisper encouragements she no longer believed in. And above all, she didn't want to become someone else's memory before she had a chance to choose how she would be remembered. That kind of helplessness. The slow, painful loss of dignity was not something Amy was willing to surrender to. Not when she had one final choice left to make. So she made her peace. Quietly. Methodically. She arranged a series of final encounters that to the outside world looked incidental, casual, unremarkable. With Damien, she spoke about his future, urging him to keep pursuing the life he was meant for, even if the path was still unclear. With Nate, she allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability, cracking open the door to her soul just wide enough for him to glimpse her fear and strength in equal measure. And with Audra, the woman who had once felt like a daughter to her, she reminisced about simpler times, safe memories, laughter that echoed like ghost songs in her mind. But Nate was the first to sense something was wrong. "Why are you talking like this?" he asked one evening, his voice shaking beneath the surface of his concern. "You've changed. You're not fighting anymore. What are you planning?" Amy just smiled. That sad, knowing smile that felt like a goodbye masked as comfort. "I'm just tired, Nate," she said. "And I'm finally listening to what my body's been trying to tell me all along." Her decision wasn't about giving up, it was about taking control. About choosing how her story would end, rather than letting her illness write the final chapter. And so, without ceremony, without warning, Amy packed a small bag, wrote a letter filled with love and apology, and slipped away from Genoa City in the early hours of morning. Her car, a worn but dependable sedan that had carried her through decades of memories, became her vessel of solitude. And as she drove past familiar landmarks and into the unknown, tears streamed freely down her face, not out of fear, but because she had found the courage to let go. Back in Genoa City, her letter tore through the hearts of those who found it. Damien, reading the final words of a mother he had spent years resenting, felt his entire soul rupture. The regret came like a tidal wave. He should have forgiven her. Should have listened. Should have held her hand in those final days instead of holding on to anger like armor. Now, all he had was a crumpled piece of paper and the echo of a woman who had loved him more than she ever dared to admit. Without a word, he packed a bag of his own, got in his car, and started driving. He didn't know where she had gone. But he had to try. He had to find her. Meanwhile, Amy sat in her car, pulled off to the side of a winding mountain road, engine humming softly beneath her. The sky was painted in the soft grays of dusk, a world between light and dark that felt fitting for this in-between moment of her life. Her eyes were red, her cheeks damp, but there was peace in her stillness. In her silence. She looked out at the horizon, wondering if there would be a sign. Some message from the universe to reassure her that this was right. But there was only the wind, the slow tick of the cooling engine, and the rhythmic thud of her heart slowing as the night grew colder. She didn't know if Damien would find her. She didn't even know if she wanted him to. Part of her hoped he would, but only if he could forgive her. If he could understand why she left, and why she chose to vanish on her own terms. The rest of the world could carry on without her, but she didn't want to leave it in chaos. Her final act wasn't abandonment. It was mercy. For herself. For everyone else. Audra wept when she found out. Her grief was silent, private, sharp. She had always admired Amy's strength, envied her composure, and now she would remember her as a woman who refused to let disease strip her of that power. Nate went to the hospital chapel, not out of faith but out of helplessness, staring at the candles and wondering how something so bright could be extinguished so fast. And in that car, on that forgotten road, Amy waited. Not for death, but for silence. For the final quiet she had longed for, a silence without pain, without apologies, without hospital monitors counting down her final moments. Just silence. Just peace. But somewhere, not far away, another car approached. Tires on gravel. A heartbeat against the wind. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for a final goodbye. For days, the image of Amy driving away into the unknown haunted every waking moment in Genoa City. Her note had been found folded neatly on her kitchen counter, scrawled in a gentle but trembling hand. There was no anger in it, no accusation, only farewell. And yet, the silence that followed was more devastating than any explosion. Her loved ones were left behind in a vacuum, not just grieving, but drowning in uncertainty. The idea that Amy had made a final decision on her own, without letting anyone witness her last breath, without allowing them the dignity to say goodbye, was unbearable. It left her son Damien in pieces. And the more he thought about it, the more something felt wrong. Damien had replayed her final words in his head hundreds of times, how she smiled, how she deflected, how she clung to strength even as her body betrayed her. She had been tired, yes. But not empty. She had still made plans. She still asked questions about his life, about his future. She still told him, "You deserve more than you think, Damien. Don't let the past convince you you're unworthy." That didn't sound like a woman ready to give up on life. That sounded like a mother still fighting, for herself and for her son. So why would she suddenly choose to vanish into the night, alone, to die in silence? The guilt Damien felt was unbearable. He blamed himself for the years of cold distance, for letting old wounds stay open too long. He'd waited too long to forgive her, too long to show her that he still needed her. And now, all he had was silence. The calls to her phone went unanswered. The voicemail, which he once found comforting just to hear her voice, now felt like a cruel mockery of connection. The line rang and rang until it became an echo of loss. But it wasn't just the silence that bothered him, it was the details. Her car had been spotted on the edge of a forest road several hours outside of Genoa City. The engine was off. The driver's side door was unlocked. Her bag was still inside. But Amy was nowhere to be found. No blood. No tracks. No signs of an animal attack. Just nothing. The search teams combed the area. Drones were sent up. Volunteers scoured the trails. Yet no trace of her was ever recovered. At first, people whispered about her choosing to walk into the woods to die peacefully. But that didn't fit Amy. She wasn't some tragic wanderer surrendering herself to nature. She was sharp. Strategic. Even in sickness, Amy liked control. If she had truly chosen to end her life, she would have done it with precision, not with chaos. That's when the rumors started. A nurse from the hospital swore she saw a man in Amy's room a few days before she disappeared, a man who wasn't family, who never signed in at the front desk, but who spoke to Amy behind a closed door for over 20 minutes. Another resident claimed she saw Amy talking to someone at a cafe near the edge of town. The woman seemed upset. Scared. Looking over her shoulder. Damien didn't want to believe it. But the pieces were no longer aligning. The whispers grew louder. Maybe she didn't leave on her own. Maybe the letter was planted. Maybe someone wanted her gone. Nate, once her closest confidant, became suspicious too. Amy wasn't stupid, he told Damien during a long walk through Chancellor Park. She was sick, yes. But she wasn't reckless. And she sure as hell wasn't someone who'd just leave her family to grieve like that. Not without something, or someone, forcing her to. Audra couldn't stop shaking. She remembered a moment, barely a flicker of a conversation, when Amy had told her, not everyone who offers help is really helping. At the time, Audra thought it was a passing comment. A philosophical musing. But now, with Amy missing, it felt like a warning that had gone unheard. The worst part was the sudden reappearance of old enemies. People Amy had once testified against. Quiet threats from her past that she never fully spoke of. Damien found old journals in her apartment, entries filled with veiled names, cryptic thoughts, and questions about whether the people around her were really who they claimed to be. One entry read, "I don't know if it's the illness or reality, but I swear I saw him again. Watching. Waiting." Who was him? The theory that Amy staged her death, or even her disappearance, to escape something darker, began to feel less like speculation and more like a frightening possibility. What if Amy wasn't dying after all? What if she had been lied to about her condition? What if someone had manipulated her diagnosis, planted the idea that she was running out of time, in order to push her toward a breakdown, or into hiding? Damien's grief turned to fury. He refused to let the story end like this. He refused to accept that his mother simply went away. He began his own investigation, retracing her final days, pulling security footage, digging through hospital records. And that's when he found it, a prescription signed by a doctor who didn't exist. A fake name. A signature that led nowhere. The medication she had been taking wasn't even approved for her condition. It wasn't treatment. It was sedation. The kidnapping theory was no longer a theory. Someone wanted Amy out of the picture. Someone had used her vulnerability, her fear of death, her strained relationships, to isolate her, and then took her. And now, Damien's mission wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about rescue. He would find his mother. He would bring her home. And he would tear apart whoever dared to steal her final days from her, piece by piece. In a cold room somewhere far from Genoa, Amy sat. Alive. But not safe. And her story? It wasn't over. It was just beginning. Would you like me to continue this with Damien tracking down Amy's captor, or revealing who is behind the kidnapping? I can expand this into a full mystery arc with betrayal, revelations, and a final emotional reunion, or heartbreaking twist, depending on your preference.